The snow fell in thick, silent curtains across the Montana Territory as Hannah Prescott stood in the small parlor of the widow Carson's boarding house, her hands clasped tightly in front of her and her eyes fixed on the worn floorboards beneath her feet. It was December 1886, and she was about to meet the man who had answered her advertisement as a mail order. Bride, a man who knew nothing about her except what she had been willing to reveal in carefully worded letters. At 28, Hannah understood that she was considered past the age when most women married. She had spent the last 10 years caring for her invalid mother, watching as the men her own age married younger, prettier women while she remained invisible, the dutiful daughter who never attended dances or social gatherings because someone needed to stay home and provide care. When her mother finally passed 6 months ago, Hannah found herself alone in the world with no family, few prospects, and a deep-seated belief that she had somehow missed her chance at the kind of life other women took for granted. The advertisement she had placed in the matrimonial newspaper had been an act of desperation disguised as practicality. She had been painfully honest in her letters to James Hartwell, the rancher who had responded to her advertisement. She had told him she was plain-featured and unremarkable in appearance, that she had no dowry or property to bring to a marriage, and that her only real skills were domestic, cooking, cleaning, and managing a household. What she hadn't told him was how deeply she doubted that any man would truly want her, or how certain she was that she would somehow disappoint him when they finally met. Now, as she heard the sound of boots on the wooden steps outside and the low rumble of male voices, Hannah felt her stomach clench with familiar anxiety. She had traveled across 3 states to meet this stranger, using the last of her modest savings to make the journey, and she was terrified that one look at her would send him running back to his ranch alone. The parlor door opened, and Widow Carson entered with a tall man behind her. James Hartwell was perhaps 35, with dark hair showing the first touches of gray at the temples and blue eyes that held both intelligence and kindness. He was handsome in a weathered outdoor way, and Hannah felt her heart sink as she realized that a man like this could surely find someone more suitable than her. "Miss Prescott," Widow Carson said with forced cheer, "may I present Mr. James Hartwell? Mr. Hartwell, this is Miss Hannah Prescott." James removed his hat and studied Hannah with an expression that was neither disappointed nor enthusiastic, merely thoughtful. Hannah kept her eyes downcast, unable to meet his gaze directly. "Miss Prescott," James said, his voice deeper than she had expected. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." "Mr. Hartwell," Hannah replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Widow Carson, sensing the awkwardness in the room, cleared her throat. "I'll just go fetch some coffee and leave you two to get acquainted." After the widow departed, an uncomfortable silence filled the parlor. Hannah could feel James studying her, and she braced herself for the polite excuses, the careful explanations that he had changed his mind about the arrangement. "Miss Prescott," James said finally, "would you do me the courtesy of looking at me?" Hannah forced herself to raise her eyes, meeting his gaze with the kind of courage that came from having already resigned herself to disappointment. What she saw in his face surprised her, not revulsion or regret, but genuine curiosity. "That's better," James said with a slight smile. "I find it difficult to have a conversation with the top of someone's head." Despite her nervousness, Hannah felt her lips twitch with the beginning of a smile. "I apologize, Mr. Hartwell. I'm not very good at social interactions." "Neither am I," James admitted, settling into a chair across from her and gesturing for her to sit as well. "I've spent most of my adult life working cattle and building a ranch. My conversation tends toward the practical rather than the poetical." Hannah perched on the edge of the settee, her hands still clasped tightly in her lap. "Mr. Hartwell, before we go any further, I need to be completely honest with you about something." "I'm listening." Hannah took a deep breath, forcing out the words she had been rehearsing during the entire journey west. "I know what you must be thinking now that you've seen me. I'm not beautiful or charming or any of the things that men typically want in a wife. I'm just ordinary, plain, unremarkable." She paused, gathering her courage for the final admission. "No one has ever wanted to marry me, sir. Not when there were prettier options available. But I can cook, and I can manage a household efficiently, and I promise I would work very hard to be useful to you. James was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "Miss Prescott, may I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Do you think I'm a fool?" Hannah looked up at him in confusion. "No, of course not. Why would you think that? Because you seem to believe that I traveled to this boarding house, having corresponded with you for 3 months, without forming any clear idea of what kind of person you were," James said. "You seem to think that I was expecting to meet some great beauty, despite the fact that you explicitly told me in your letters that you were plain-featured." I don't understand," Hannah said. James leaned forward in his chair, his blue eyes intent on her face. "Hannah, may I call you Hannah?" She nodded mutely. "Hannah, in your letters you told me about caring for your mother for 10 years with patience and devotion. You described managing a household on limited resources, making do with what you had and finding creative solutions to practical problems. You wrote about your love of reading, your interest in gardening, and your belief that a good marriage was built on mutual respect and shared responsibilities rather than mere romantic attraction." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "Those letters told me far more about your character than any photograph or physical description could have done. They showed me a woman of intelligence, compassion, and practical capability. A woman who understood that real life on a frontier ranch requires strength and determination rather than delicate sensibilities." Hannah felt tears gathering in her eyes as she listened to him articulate qualities she had never thought anyone would value. "But surely you would prefer someone more attractive. Someone you could be proud to introduce as your wife." "Attractive." James repeated the word as if testing its meaning. "Hannah, do you know what I find attractive?" She shook her head. "I find it attractive when someone speaks their mind honestly rather than playing social games. I find it attractive when a person has the strength to do difficult things without complaint. I find it attractive when someone values substance over superficial appearances." He smiled slightly. "In other words, I find you attractive exactly as you are because you possess the qualities that actually matter in a life partner." "You're just being kind," Hannah whispered. "I'm being honest," James corrected firmly. "Hannah, I'm 35 years old. I've been running my ranch alone for 10 years, and I've had plenty of opportunities to marry during that time. Every season brings a new crop of young women through town, fresh from the East and looking for husbands. Do you know why I never married any of them? Why? Because they were looking for romance and adventure, not partnership and shared purpose. They saw the ranch as a setting for their fantasies about frontier life, not as the hard work and long days that it actually requires. Within a month, most of them would have been begging to return to civilization." James stood and walked to the window, looking out at the falling snow. "When I read your advertisement and then your letters, I recognized something I'd been searching for without quite knowing it. A partner who understood that the best marriages are built on mutual respect, shared values, and the daily choice to support each other through whatever challenges arise." He turned back to face her, his expression serious but kind. "I don't need someone beautiful by conventional standards. I need someone capable, intelligent, and strong. Someone who can manage a household efficiently, make sound decisions in my absence, and stand as my equal partner in building something lasting." Hannah felt something shift inside her chest, a cautious hope that she barely dared to acknowledge. "And you think I could be that person?" "I think you already are that person," James said simply. "The question is whether you're willing to take a chance on building that kind of life with me." Hannah looked at this man who seemed to see qualities in her that no one else had ever noticed or valued. She thought about the life she had left behind, lonely, limited, and lacking in purpose beyond mere survival. And she thought about what he was offering. Not romance or rescue, but genuine partnership with someone who apparently valued the things that made her who she was. "Mr. Hartwell, James," she corrected herself. "I would be honored to marry you and help you build that kind of life." James smiled, and the expression transformed his serious face completely. "Then I have something for you," He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. Opening it, he revealed a simple gold band set with a single small sapphire. "It was my mother's," James explained. "She gave it to me before she died and told me to give it to a woman who would value it for what it represented rather than its monetary worth. A woman who understood that real treasure is found in character and commitment rather than in gold and jewels." Hannah accepted the ring with trembling hands, overwhelmed by the significance of the gesture. "It's beautiful. Like you," James said softly. "Beautiful in the ways that truly matter." They were married 2 days later in a simple ceremony at the local church, with Widow Carson and the minister serving as witnesses. Hannah wore her best dress, a practical wool in a deep blue that brought out her eyes, and carried a small bouquet of dried flowers that James had purchased from the general store. But it was after the ceremony, during the wagon ride to James's ranch through the snowy countryside, that Hannah truly began to understand what her new husband had meant about seeing beyond superficial qualities. "Tell me about your ranch," she said as they traveled through the winter landscape. James's face lit up with enthusiasm as he described the property he had built over the past decade, the main house he had constructed with his own hands, the expanding herd of cattle, the improvements he had planned but never had the time or help to implement. "I've been wanting to expand the vegetable garden for years," he said, "but I can barely keep up with the basic necessities, let alone work on anything extra. And the house, well, it's functional, but it's not really a home. It needs a woman's touch to make it feel welcoming." "What about ranch hands?" Hannah asked. "Do you employ help?" "3 full-time cowboys and a couple of seasonal workers during roundup," James replied. "Good men, but they're used to rough living and basic cooking. I've been doing most of the meal preparation myself with varying degrees of success." Hannah felt a spark of excitement at the challenge he was describing. "In your letters, you mentioned wanting to increase the herd size. Have you considered diversifying the operation, adding chickens for eggs and meat, perhaps a few dairy cows?" James looked at her with surprise and pleasure. "I've thought about it, but I wasn't sure if... That is, I didn't know if you would be interested in that kind of expansion. I managed my mother's household for 10 years on very limited resources," Hannah said, her natural reticence fading as she discussed practical matters. "One thing I learned was that diversification creates stability. If cattle prices fall, you have other sources of income and food security." "You've obviously thought about this," James said, his respect evident in his voice. "I've thought about many things during the years I spent caring for my mother," Hannah admitted. "I read every farming and household management journal I could find at the library. I suppose I was planning for a future I wasn't sure I would ever have." "Well, you have it now," James said firmly. "And I want to hear every idea you have for improving the ranch." Over the following months, Hannah threw herself into her new life with energy and enthusiasm that surprised even her. The ranch house, which had been merely functional under James's bachelor management, gradually transformed into a real home, not through expensive furnishings or decorative fripperies, but through efficient organization, careful maintenance, and the kind of welcoming atmosphere that comes from someone who truly cares about creating a comfortable space. But Hannah's contributions went far beyond domestic improvements. She proved to have a natural head for business, suggesting efficiencies in the ranch operations that James had never considered. She established relationships with local merchants that resulted in better prices for supplies. She started the chicken operation she had proposed, along with a substantial kitchen garden that would provide fresh vegetables throughout the growing season and preserved goods for winter. "You're remarkable," James told her one evening as they reviewed the ranch accounts together, a weekly ritual they had established early in their marriage. "In 6 months, you've transformed both the household and the business operations." Hannah felt her cheeks warm with pleasure at his praise. "I'm just doing what needs to be done." "You're doing far more than that," James insisted. "You're making this ranch into everything I always hoped it could be, but didn't know how to achieve on my own." As spring turned to summer and summer to autumn, Hannah found herself blossoming in ways she had never imagined possible. The physical work of ranch life, combined with better nutrition and the happiness that came from feeling valued and purposeful, brought a glow to her features that had nothing to do with conventional beauty and everything to do with contentment and confidence. The ranch hands, initially skeptical about having a woman in charge of domestic operations, became fiercely protective of Hannah as they enjoyed the benefits of regular, excellent meals and a well-organized household. The local community, which had initially viewed her with the mild curiosity reserved for newcomers, gradually came to respect her practical competence and generous nature. But it was the relationship between Hannah and James that truly flourished during that first year of marriage. What had begun as a practical arrangement based on mutual respect gradually deepened into genuine affection and eventually into love, not the breathless passion of youth, but the steady, enduring love that came from truly knowing and appreciating another person. "Hannah," James said one winter evening as they sat by the fire after supper, "I need to tell you something." Hannah looked up from the sock she was darning, noting the seriousness in his expression. "What is it? When I married you, I thought I understood what I was getting. A capable partner who would help me run the ranch efficiently. Someone practical and competent." Hannah felt a flutter of anxiety. "Have I disappointed you in some way?" "Just the opposite," James said, moving to sit beside her on the settee. "You've exceeded my expectations in every way. But more than that, you've taught me something important about what it means to truly see another person." He took the sock from her hands and held both of her hands in his. "When we met, you told me that no one had ever wanted to marry you because you weren't beautiful or charming. And I told you that I valued substance over superficial appearances. But what I didn't tell you, what I didn't fully understand myself, was that real beauty comes from watching someone live their values every day." James paused, searching for the right words. "Hannah, you are beautiful to me. Not despite your plain features, but including them, because they're part of the package that makes you who you are. You're beautiful when you're working in the garden at dawn. You're beautiful when you're teaching me how to make a household budget. You're beautiful when you're arguing with me about the best way to organize the barn or the most efficient feeding schedule for the chickens." Hannah felt tears gathering in her eyes. "James, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll stay with me forever," James said softly. "Say you'll keep challenging me to be better and smarter and more thoughtful. Say you'll continue building this life with me not because you have no other options, but because you choose to." "I choose to," Hannah whispered. "Not because I'm grateful for being rescued, but because you're the first person who ever made me feel like I was enough exactly as I am. Because you valued the things about me that no one else ever noticed. Because you taught me that real love is about seeing and appreciating someone's true character, rather than judging them by superficial standards." When James kissed her, it was with the passion of a man who had discovered that the most profound beauty came from the courage to be fully yourself, and the wisdom to recognize and cherish that quality in another person. Their life together became a model for others in their community, proof that the strongest marriages were built not on initial attraction or romantic fantasy, but on mutual respect, shared values, and the daily choice to support and appreciate each other. They welcomed 4 children over the years, teaching each of them that real worth was measured by character and capability rather than physical appearance or social status. When asked about the secret to their happy marriage, James would always say the same thing. "I was wise enough to see beyond superficial qualities to recognize true character and worth. Hannah taught me that the most beautiful people are those who live their values courageously and love others generously." And Hannah would add, with a smile that transformed her plain features into something genuinely radiant. "And James taught me that being truly seen and valued for who you are is the greatest gift anyone can give or receive." Their story became a reminder that sometimes the most profound love stories began not with passion or romance, but with the simple wisdom to look beyond surface appearances and recognize the kind of beauty that came from strength of character, depth of compassion, and the courage to be authentically yourself. If this story of being seen and valued for who we truly are, beyond superficial judgments, touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need to be reminded that real worth comes from character, capability, and the courage to live authentically. Your support helps these stories reach others who may be struggling with self-doubt, showing them that the right person will recognize and cherish the qualities that truly matter. Thank you for believing in love stories that celebrate substance over surface and prove that the most beautiful relationships are built on the foundation of genuine appreciation for each other's true selves.